Yemen analyst Nabeel Nowairah joins us now from Washington. Nabeel, let's not sensationalize war and let's not glorify a conflict, but I still think, and I've struggled with how I was going to ask you this question, I still think it's important for people around the world to know about these atrocities and some of the details. Do you know of any particular instances which have shocked even you who have been following the war in Yemen since it started?
Well, all the incidents, all the attacks, the violations that have been happening in Yemen in the last 6 years have been shocking. And the Yemeni people, no matter where in Yemen, whether in the north or the south, are suffering a lot since the beginning of this war in March 2015, when the Saudi-led coalition decided to intervene in Yemen. The UN report, which was released yesterday, stresses the fact that all the parties involved in the conflict are responsible for the violations against the Yemeni people. And we are talking about all kinds of violations, from enforced disappearances, enforced displacement, arbitrary killing, indiscriminate and disproportionate attacks and strikes, torture, gender-based violence. So many of the Yemeni groups, segments are affected by this war. This has been shocking. The Yemeni people are living in very, very difficult times, but this falls in deaf ears to the international community. And let's not remember that this is not only about the parties directly involved in the war, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, the Yemeni government, the de facto authorities, the Houthis, the UAE-backed Southern Transitional Council, but also involves international actors, including the United States, Britain, France, and Canada, who have been supplying arms and weapons to the Saudi-led coalition.
Yeah, absolutely. The issue of accountability is one that sometimes can lead to a reluctance by the different parties on the ground that are doing the fighting to find some sort of resolution, because they may understand that if there is peace, then there will have to be some kind of reckoning. Is that the case possibly, do you think, in Yemen at all?
Well, I guess that the main actors now in the war are the ones to decide when to end the war. I think if Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and the Houthis, because they are the strongest Yemeni party on the ground now, decide to go for peace and reach a resolution with support and pressure from international actors, and particularly the United States, I think the Yemeni people and the Yemeni parties can reach a settlement if the Yemeni people or the Yemeni main parties are allowed to go in negotiations with no pressure from international actors. I think the Yemeni parties are able to reach a resolution that will end this 6-year-old war, which everybody believes that nobody can make an advancement and win the war by the end of the day, or by the end of even 10 years.
You know, we could talk about the politics a lot. You mentioned the Southern Transitional Council, which was backed then by the UAE, and the conflict that created in terms of an overall strategy for those fighting against the Houthis, because the UAE and Saudi Arabia having previously been on the same side. I understand they've resolved most of their differences, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, how to proceed. But rather, because of this report reflecting on the suffering of civilians, I'll ask you about aid. And there was a story that the United Nations was accusing the Houthis some months ago, of denying the UN the ability to distribute food to the people who needed it the most, and so food became like a weapon of war. What is the situation in terms of people being able to feed themselves now?
Well, according to this report, the de facto authorities, the Houthis in the north, and the Yemeni government, Hadi government, are both accused of making hurdles on the Yemeni people to access food and also to access international aid. And both parties are putting more restrictions on the Yemeni people, and they are kind of stealing the international aid to their benefit without having the Yemenis in need for these aids and assistance. And I think that these parties try to use, what they can get from the international community for to empower and increase their military capabilities rather than distributing the food to the Yemeni people. And this again applies both in the north where the Houthis control, and also in the south where the Yemeni government or the STC have been controlling in the last years.
In terms of how people are able to go about their daily lives, how much are they being affected? How much are they suffering? Education for children, schools open? What about hospital facilities? All of the things that most people take for granted. How has that been affected?
Well, the Yemeni people have been seriously affected. Life there is very, very difficult. I mean, the only way the Yemenis are kind of surviving because they are very resilient. But the situation in all levels, including health, education, and other levels, are very deteriorating. And the Yemeni people are barely surviving. But because of social norms, Yemenis have been resilient and been trying their best to survive in these difficult times. But I think if the war continues for more than 1 year from now, we already have millions of people who are in need of need in Yemen. Maybe in a year time or more, we will see like the whole Yemeni population is about 30 million people are in need of immediate humanitarian assistance.
Nabeel, thank you so much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. Nabeel Nowairah speaking to us from the capital of the United States.